All right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start recording, but yeah, sorry. I was coming from my it was today was my great grandma's birthday, so cumplió 95.
Oh,
So they had the whole family there doing a little brunch for her. So, yeah.
nice.
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás hoy?
Bien, bien, disfrutando el domingo.
Yeah. Are you in the office or are you at home
Yeah,
right now?
I'm in the office.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, here. It's quiet.
Yeah. On a Sunday, me imagino.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pues I'm gonna go straight into the podcast. Um, this is for Café Empatía, so I'm calling it Café Empatía, Charlas y Platicas with Rosemary Bautista. So I really just, want to give you a space to share about who you are, how you got to where you're at, what you're doing right now, anything else you'd like to share, and then eventually getting into the conversation of mental health and how that either intersects within your own personal life, what you'd like to bring to light within that area of health, and whatever else you'd like to touch on. But just want to get started, want to be mindful of the time, and just give you the space to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Fausto.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's always a tough question because you get asked to tell us a little bit about yourself every time you go to any professional event, and it's like,
Who is
where do I
Rosemary?
start? Yeah, exactly. And it's like who I am is a lot of things.
Mm,
But I think you have to really start, like, I always like to start with talking about like where I come from and my family, because I think that
mm,
really um is centers where the trajectory of my life and where I am now. So I would say that I'm the granddaughter of a bracero, daughter of immigrants. Both,
mm.
my parents migrated here. One of them, legally, quote unquote, and
Yeah.
the other one not that way. um and
Like many of us.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm one of seven kids, very big family.
Wow.
Um, and
Where do you
so
where do you fall where do you fall in the seven?
I am the third.
The
The
third.
third. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's four
I'm the
four
oldest.
girls. Yeah.
I'm the oldest of eight. And
You're the
yeah, I'm the
oldest?
oldest of eight. So I didn't know you were part of a group of seven.
Yeah.
So that's fun. Yeah, and there for us there's four and four.
Four
So
and four.
four males and four females.
No, for us it's four females and we're the oldest, and then three boys, so they're
Oh
the youngest. Yeah.
gosh. That's an
Yeah.
interesting dynamic.
It is a very interesting dynamic. Yeah. So
Um,
yeah, so I grew up here in the Coachella Valley. I was born in, JFK Hospital, like all of my siblings, and this is where I grew up. I went to CV High School. I
Go Arabs.
graduated from there. Yeah, go Arabs. And then went on to UC Berkeley. That's where I did my bachelor's degree. And I always tell people, like, how did you end up at Berkeley? And it was like, it was the only school with their architecture program at the time. I thought I wanted to be an
Mm.
architect. And then when I got
Oh.
there, yeah, then when I got there, I realized, like, it's a lot of work and they do a lot of math. So I decided, you know what, I'm really interested in all these history classes and these poli sci classes. I think, like,
Mm.
I'm thinking of maybe I'm more of a writer, analytical person type. So I decided, I'm going to do political science and get my degree and then figure out what I'm going to do after that, if I want to do like public policy or maybe law. And so that's kind of where I went. I went in that focus.
Was that transition hard for you? Like making, I mean, because if you had an idea for going for architecture, and I say this because sometimes we go into the college setting, right, or these next phases of education, and we think we have an idea of what we want to do, and then we're hit with reality, and we're forced to pivot. Did you find it hard for yourself to make that transition, or even accept for yourself, like, I'm not gonna be an architect. I'm gonna see what this leads to with the poli sci, with the history classes.
Yeah, I think for me, that creative part of myself, that really like to art and to draw
Mm,
and to create. I think that part just kind of took a step back and said, I'm also really good at all these other things.
Mm,
And I think the good thing for me was that opportunity to be doing internships and working, and working in the legal system as an undergrad helped me to see how I could be helpful
mm,
in that role, doing legal advocacy and public policy and all of that. So I decided, like, this is great. This is actually, maybe I wasn't meant to do that. Maybe what I thought I wanted to do at age 17 is not really what I was meant to do. And so I think it was okay. I don't think that it was devastating for me. It was just a, like I said, a pivot, a transition, but it wasn't painful.
yeah. Do you feel like you still apply that creative side of yourself to either, the job you're in now, or because I know you're super involved in a lot of other things. So do you find yourself tapping in or applying that part of yourself into the things that you do either in work or outside of work?
Yeah, like not so much in work, I think, because it's like the artistic part is kind of difficult to incorporate it, but in terms of being really creative and like making things fun, like, I try to do that, like with, either in the chapters, like my alumni chapter, or like even when I'm doing like presentations for staff, I try to like be really creative for them to help them learn material, because
Mm,
a lot of the work that we do here at CRLA, where I'm an attorney now, is that we kind of have this like statewide support system where we're all constantly learning from each
mm,
other. And so that's a big piece of it, especially as a directing attorney from the office. Like, we're kind of expected to help other attorneys, by being mentors and helping them learn material so that they know, how to become better lawyers in a certain subject area.
yeah, that's cool. And so you did your undergrad. Did you end up doing your master's, or any the second part of your higher education? Did you
Uh,
also?
yeah, so I ended up doing straight after, right after I finished my bachelor's, I enrolled at the University of San Francisco, and that's where I did my JD degree, so to get my law degree. And so I still stayed in the Bay Area, which was amazing,
Um,
because it's just such a great experience to live out there. It's very different from the Valley.
yeah,
But
yeah,
and then after that, I did come back, home.
yeah. When you were growing up, did you ever have this idea of wanting to come back home and work here? Because I know a lot of times when we're in high school, and I remember being in CV and the teachers just being like, leave, get out of here. Even my family, just like leave. But I feel like when I left and I was doing work in LA, I was doing community health work, and I realized this is work that I could be doing at home.
Mhm.
This is, and I, as fulfilling as the work was in LA, it was very, for me, eye opening, because I'm like, it, there was a disconnection in me being within my own community to feel like I'm doing what I can first for the folks that were with me, in my first 18 years of life. And now when I came back, I feel like it's a lot more fulfilling. But um, did you ever see yourself coming back to the Valley and working here and creating your life here?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question, because I think that when I was applying to colleges, um, I I had a plan to just like leave the valley, and
Mm,
for different reasons, but a lot of them were just, very personal, because I just felt like I needed to, it was an opportunity to set boundaries with my family,
mm,
and to do my own thing, because I felt like, okay, I don't approve of, of a lot of the things that happen, and I don't approve a lot of the parenting styles, it was very chaotic. I think, like, when you're a child in a very large family, there's a lot of chaos going on. There's so many different personalities,
yeah,
and especially as children, like, it can get very um like just very difficult to be with so many people. And I think in terms of it, sometimes even like physically,
yeah,
you fight with your
yeah.
siblings,
The
which you don't
space.
yeah, and you think
Mm,
about it, like, and as an adult now, like, why, how did we do that? We like really hurt each other physically. So I think my plan was always like, I want to get away from here. And
mm,
then after I graduated from law school, I did have an opportunity to continue. Like, I was offered a job to stay there, and they weren't going to be paying a lot of money, but but I was like, yeah, this is great. I have a job lined up, and
Mm,
I'm still, I still haven't even taken the bar. I'm going to take the bar and hopefully pass it, and I'll have a job lined up already. But the reason really at that time that I ended up coming home wasn't because I wanted to be back with my family, but
mm,
because my mother was very sick. She had just been diagnosed with cancer, and I felt like I couldn't help support my family financially if I was like paying an apartment up north
yeah,
and then, having
yeah.
to send money down. So that was really the like determining factor. Like I have to go back home
Yeah.
because of family.
And how long ago was that?
That was, let me see, this was in 2009.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dang. And so you've been back here ever
yeah,
since. Yeah.
yeah.
Very nice. I'm curious, for those who are listening, just because, I want to acknowledge like a Latina within law. Like I feel like that's a really big thing to acknowledge. Kind of like how you recognized when you were in school that you can contribute to this career. You have what you might have to bring to the table in terms of advocacy. So I want to acknowledge all of that, and I'm curious, like, when you were growing up, because it sounds like you had already a goal from finishing high school to going to college. Like that, it sounds like you already had that was already a goal that you had in mind. Um, did you always have that support from those around you, whether it be like your family, teachers? Did they ever see like, wow, like, you can draw, or you can, you have this way of doing things, and we see the potential, and just kind of like nurtured that within you? Do you feel like that was constant throughout your childhood, or, you know because I feel like it's also a mindset to go into school and
Mhm.
to have this idea of like, this is what I want to do, and to have the determination, and las ganas. So I'm curious, like, did you have that growing up? And if you did, who was that for you, and how much do you feel like it impacted you to be on the course that you're on right now?
Yeah, so I think it was a lot of it is like you mentioned, it's just like ganas, like personally from me, I think it started off more as a trying to focus and trying to spend as much time being productive and like doing after school activities so that I didn't have to be in such a chaotic environment all the
Mm,
time as a child. So I think it was more of that. So, I would participate like after school art programs and like math programs and things like that. And I did find that I had a lot of mentors and a lot of all my teachers. And I think that's why it was really hard for me to choose like what I wanted to do
mm,
as a profession because I was really good at everything. I was very good at writing. I was very good at history, at
yeah.
math. Actually, I wasn't that great at math. That I have so, but art and everything like so. But I still did really well in math, and I had great friends. Like a very like a small cohort of friends that I'm still in touch with to this day, actually.
Yeah.
And we would compete each other. It was competitive, but at the same time, we would work together, and that was like my support network at the time. And I did find, unlike I think I do hear from other students that they didn't feel like they had that support from like
Mm,
their teachers or their parents. Um, I think my parents, because they weren't highly educated, they supported me in the way that they could. Like if I needed materials for something,
yeah.
they would be there. But it's not like they couldn't really help me find out resources or like help me with projects, things like that. But I think that they were there and they tried to be there at all the ceremonies and events that I needed to attend, or if I needed transportation, or
Where it counts.
yeah, like I used to play soccer and tennis, and so like they were the people that would pick me up and drop me off after practice, so that helped out. Like there was that support, there definitely was that.
Yeah. It sounds like you were super involved, like, in school. And when you talk about all this kind of stuff, it really reminds me of me when I was in school, because for me growing up, school was an outlet for me. And so whether it was reading, and I never got student of the month in elementary. I was always upset at myself because I never got student of the month. I was always reader of the month. and I hated it. And I was like, I want another month, but I was always reader of the month, and I never understood why. But I remember always reading, always being going to after school program, ACEs, being part of the Flocorico, any little thing, sports, any little thing that could kind of get me out of the house. And that even continued on into once we got taken away. My grandparents took us, and I was involved in middle school and high school. Um, I feel like that a lot of that was my response to the situation that was at home, right? Unconsciously. But now that I look back at it, I'm very grateful as to the way I moved when I was growing up, because it's added to kind of who I am today. And I see a lot of like uh just little things that I do now that remind me of back then. And
Mhm.
I don't know, it's beautiful because I guess as I reflect in getting older, it's kind of like, wow, like this is how I was. And I feel like sometimes we don't give ourselves the moment to acknowledge that, and to acknowledge our growth in that. So I just wanted to share that with you, because as you're talking, I'm seeing myself, and I'm like, that's weird. um
But
and
it's yeah, now that you're saying that, I was like, it's beautiful, but at the same time, I think now, as I've gone through like my journey, and I realize that like, yes, it was beautiful that we were able to do this to overcome challenges, but it would have been nice to be able to do this without having those challenges to
mm,
overcome.
yeah.
Because imagine if we would just have this great environment to grow up in and be, strongly supported, and then be able to do this because we wanted to do this
mm,
versus because we were trying to,
yeah.
as a survival,
Yeah.
instinct.
And I feel like that goes into, essentially what we want to create for our own families, right? And so, I know your mom, and like you said, you play different roles. And I guess I'm curious, because I feel like within my own journey, it's been definitely a struggle to unpack the responsibility that I put on myself as the oldest sibling. And so I've battled with that for as long as I can remember. And I'm at a point now where I have a better relationship with it. um but do you find yourself still in that, or do you put that pressure or that responsibility, either do you find it now, or did you struggle with it at all back then, being the third oldest, and having older sisters live life and do their thing, and learn and be able to see them move, and then have you know do your thing, and try to steer your younger siblings, especially the youngest three men. I felt like that's just an interesting dynamic, to have the oldest sisters, and then to have the youngest um the youngest siblings be guys. But yeah, do you find that like responsibility on yourself, or you know do you see it now more as a mom, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, so I think, initially, I think as I was growing up, I always felt that it was my responsibility because, my oldest sister, when I left to college, my oldest sister was still living there, but my second oldest had already moved out with her
Mm,
partner at the time. So she was living on her own independently. And then, at some point, like my oldest sister got married, moved out of the home, and I was in college during this time, but I still felt like, when my siblings needed something because I was the first one to go to college, whether it was to fill out FAFSA forms, whether it was to review applications, to even navigate the process of like getting their dorm rooms set up,
mm,
or like putting, how to secure a dorm room, how to
yeah.
send your security deposit for that, applying for a new lease, like all of these questions would come to me. And so I did feel like there was all this pressure constantly of doing that. And eventually, I think when I, started working, a lot of times it was like, oh, okay, she's the one that's able financially to help others
Mm,
financially. And I wanted to do that because, I didn't want as a family, and you're the oldest. So I'm sure you feel this way too. Like if you have a sibling that's coming to you and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm struggling this month. I need groceries. And you're like, yes, I'm going to help you because
yeah.
that's what you do as a family. So I think it's changed over time, like as they gotten older, like, most of them are now slightly more independent. Maybe the youngest isn't as much. And so he still needs a lot of support, but I think like that actually the way that that kind of affected me as uh as an adult was more like I felt that because I felt like I had already had these parental responsibilities,
Mm,
and it made me think that maybe I don't want to have children anymore.
mm,
So it did make me feel like, you know what, I think I would be okay with no children because I've already done that. I've already helped raise like my younger siblings or even help my older siblings, and then taking care of my nieces and nephews. And, I already do like the school transports and like, recitals and things like that. Like I already feel like I've done the parenting, changed diapers, done the
yeah.
feedings, so maybe it's just time for me. So that's what something for me and my husband, I talked about this, like, I think like when I was younger, I felt like I definitely want to have children because I love children. But then I thought like I would be okay with maybe not having children. So
Mm,
there was that discussion that we had to have, like, is this something they really want to do? And for me, I think if I had a partner that would have said, I don't want any children, then it wouldn't have been a deal breaker for me. I would have been comfortable with that. Now that
mm.
I have my baby, I think like now that I look at her, I was like, obviously I love my child, but I
Yeah.
think like ignorance is bliss. So if I had never
Hmm.
had her, I would have been like okay because like I felt like I had already done a lot to take care of others and I was ready to like, really start taking care of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And plus, it's a whole different, I feel like it's a whole different feeling as well. Like having, I mean, I completely resonate when you're talking about going through parental responsibilities because I feel like when I was in elementary living with my parents, I was very mature for 8 years old. And I was the one also, changing my siblings. They were a year, less than a year. We had twins at one point. My youngest siblings are twins. So in that household, like I was a caretaker even though I was a kid myself, and I learned a lot about just responsibility. And it's unfortunate at a young age, like, to be put through that, but I always tell folks I'm grateful because it's just maybe the person that I am today. And if anything was different, then I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Yeah.
But I've said that same thing to my grandparents where it's like I don't and then I'm in a different place now as well, but I used to tell them like I don't think I want kids. Like, I went through the whole thing and I know what it's like, and I'm fine right now. And they would always reassure me like, "Sí, mijo, sí, entendemos que ya hiciste todo esto, pero es diferente cuando tienes tus propios hijos,
Mhm.
hijas." And I never understood that until just growing up and just seeing and maturing. And yeah, so I love that you're able to kind of just be at a point now where you can appreciate and just enjoy, your baby.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I'm curious, like, tell us within, your experience at Berkeley, one of the top public universities in the world, uh, what tools helped you with getting through that phase of your life? Because I know, coming from my own experience, there was a lot of things. And I think the biggest thing that I had to adjust to going to Berkeley as well, and coming from a big family, was learning how to be by myself because I didn't know what that felt like. And I was so used to being in a chaotic household with everybody fighting, everybody screaming, just chaos happening all the time. And then I got to college, and I found myself in a double, and I was like, I'm by myself. My roommate isn't here. So for me, community was super big. Finding different groups, spaces that uplifted not only my relationships with my peers, but also academically, and just kind of reassuring myself of that I am capable and I'm here for a reason because there was a lot of that record playing like maybe you don't deserve to be here. Why are you even here? You're not smart enough. And when I wasn't even doing anything and I was supposed to be having fun or just relaxing, there's that little voice in the head where it's like, there's other people studying. You should be studying too. So, I think for me, what was super big was just community, friends, family, and las ganas, like to actually want to, finish because it's a struggle, and I'm curious like what that looked like for you in law at Berkeley, and what worked for you, because somebody listening might not know, you might feel overwhelmed or might just feel lost with the whole process, and uh just curious what your thoughts are.
Um, I think I think I was a little bit the opposite of you, where when I left, I was so excited to be on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I miss the food. I miss my mom's food, and the dorm food at Berkeley's not that great.
Yeah.
I feel like the options are not that great, so but people will still eat the food that's there though.
Yeah.
But I think that really, like, I did miss my family, but at the same time, it was just a relief to be on my own and to have that space that I never had before. And I think it was an opportunity to, because I was in a place where no one knew me except, some people that like my friend from kindergarten went to Berkeley with me as
Mm,
well. So that was nice. We didn't we
super cool.
didn't we were in the same dorm, and we weren't together all the time. But I think it was nice because for the first couple weeks while I was getting to know people, we could have dinner together. We could,
Mm,
see if we could have lunch on campus or something. And we were different majors, so we didn't share any classes. But it was nice to have somebody from home there. So I think I was very lucky that I had a couple of people on campus that I could do that with. And then slowly, I started to getting integrated into, some of the Latino activities on campus and organizations. And that's where I built a lot of really strong friendships. People who I knew that, that I could go study with because, they were going to keep me focused. And then there were the people that I could go hang out with if I know that, they wanted to go have dinner or go to the
yeah.
movies, or they wanted to go to a party. Like, I had those people that I could reach out to in different areas, to keep me going and to keep me focused. So that was one of the things that I always made sure that the group of people that I was hanging out with, that they were responsible enough where, we knew, like, okay, we're
Mm,
going to go do this, but first we're going to study because we need to get,
yeah.
this done. And to remember, like, I couldn't go back home empty handed. I needed to make it through this, 4 years, and then again through law school, because, there was a goal, and the end goal was to be independent and self-sufficient, and not necessarily, I didn't want to have to go back home and rely on my family, because I knew financially they wouldn't be able to help me. And second of all, like, I was leaving a chaotic environment because I needed to be on my own.
Yeah.
And so I think that was really my push for me, the motivator, that, you have to do this. You absolutely cannot fail on this.
Have you always had that drive?
I think I have. I feel like I that's been me since I was like a young child.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that also, are you super competitive in sports?
I'm not that great
Like
at sports, but I but I
when you were
am
playing
competitive.
tennis, when you were doing soccer?
Yes. Yes. I'm not saying I'm
Yeah.
great, but I am competitive.
Yeah, you'll get a good match going.
Yeah.
So do you feel like within high school, going into college, going into doing your JD, and even looking at yourself right now, because I see it, like, do you feel like you've been that there's a certain essence of you that has, we change, we're ever changing, right? We're growing, we're learning, we're unlearning. But do you feel like there's like an essence of you that has been kept the same or that has been constant throughout your progression with undergrad, JD, professional career? Because you sounds like you were super involved in high school and you still applied that to college and you're still doing that right now. um how do you juggle it, or how do you like make time, um make time because within what you're doing, being an attorney and just the amount of the studying that you have to do, um it sounds like you were super busy. So do you feel like do you see that within yourself, like having that constant I guess sense of like busyness or just doing things and being involved?
Yeah, I think it's, part of it, I think it is this part of me that I think is very caring, and wanting to, to see changes and to help people in any way that I can. So I think that there is that part of me that, for instance, like in my alumni association, I participate in that because I see like how we can help students. I see like that there's that value in helping the students to make sure that they, that they feel supported during their 4 years at Berkeley in the way that I felt supported. And so I think it's important for me to give back, and so I give as much time as I can, given my, my schedule, my work schedule, and also the fact that I'm a mother now.
Yeah.
And and then I sit on a board for the Coachella Valley Housing Coalition right now, and for me that's also really important because housing is just fundamental. It's a reason why a lot of people struggle with other issues like mental
Yeah.
health, like addiction, or even not having a job, not being able um to go to school, even for children. If they don't have a home and they're homeless and they're being, moved around, a lot of times they're not able to go to school. So for me, those are all things that are really important, and I want to make sure that I can make a difference. But I think honestly, like now I can sell because I do have this self-awareness. I think a lot of times keeping busy helps me because
Mm.
the if I wasn't busy with, being a mom and doing this, if you have to sit down with your thoughts for too long,
Yeah.
that can be hard too
Yeah.
sometimes. And sometimes it's like you don't want to be sitting there with your thoughts. It's easier to just be busy with
Yeah.
everything else.
Yeah. Do you feel like I guess do you find it hard to sit down with yourself and just like sit with the thoughts and um not do anything?
Oh, I find it so hard. I find it so hard. I think it's like one of the hardest things. And when you start like a therapy journey, I think that that's one of the hard things where like a lot of people say, "Oh, I learned this from my therapist." I was like, "No, I don't think I learned anything from my therapist. I think I knew all of this.
Mm,
I just didn't want to think about it."
yeah.
I subconsciously, like, I knew that the decisions that I had made in life sometimes, or the things that I do, or how I perceive things in my life are, basically because of my childhood, of how I was raised and things that
Mm,
I saw. And so I think like, having to sit down with your thoughts is like probably one of the hardest things to do. And so, yeah. So,
yeah.
like I said, yeah, I definitely, like, not saying that the therapist is taking credit, but I think that they help you see, like, for folks that didn't see that in the past, like they can see
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, that's why I'm the way that I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I see that. I feel like when I first started, because I tell folks I wouldn't wish my mind on anybody because I feel like I have such a chaotic mind, and it's just very loud. So I feel like when I was introduced to mindfulness and just especially like as a man and just feeling overwhelmed with not only my thoughts, but those thoughts create emotions, and not knowing uh what to do with them. And when I was introduced to mindfulness and breathing exercises and all this kind of stuff, um I didn't realize how much out of tune I was with my body until I actually sat down with myself for the first time. And this was a couple years back. And I just did a little meditation where it's just like breathing, close your eyes, just focus on your breath. And when I first started doing that, I just started crying, like just tears coming out of my eyes. And I, at some point, I had to really take a step back because I was judging myself. And I'm like, why are you
Mhm.
crying? Like,
Yeah.
there's no reason you should be crying. But as I sat with it and as I, just practice compassion and self awareness, I took a step back and I was like, oh, actually, my body's feeling a lot. Like sometimes we're so in the mind that we're doing, but when we sit back and we actually take a breath and bring ourselves back into the space we're in or the body we're in, sometimes we realize there's a disconnection. So it's interesting to say that because I feel like that's really applied to me, and I'm very self-aware of just to like how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And so whenever there's something tense in my body or something's hurting, I'm like, okay, well, let me acknowledge this and see if this is pain or if this is coming from something. So that's been interesting for me, and that's helped kind of there's this app that I like to use called Headspace, and they refer to a part of the mind as the monkey mind. And so that's just kind of like the mind that's always doing, always doing. And sometimes like we have to train the monkey to just stay and just be calm. So that's been kind of my experience with that. um have you ever practiced like anything like that, meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises? Sounds like you went to therapy, so
Yeah.
I'm also curious like how that was for you. And um it sounds like you were very knowledgeable about a lot of the information, I guess. And within that, like what was the biggest takeaway for you that you still see yourself practicing or referring back to this day?
Yeah, I haven't been recently, but I think like, it's one of those things where I do recommend, and I'm thinking of going back just to do like a follow-up and be able to talk to like a professional, because I think it's hard to have a conversation with someone except, someone who has like, practiced mindfulness or like gone to therapy to be able to
Mm,
discuss. But I think I really had a good experience with my therapist, and she recommended books to read as well. So
mm,
I read a lot of books about. I know that there was one like it's called like I think The Body Keeps Account or something like that, about
that's
talking
a good
about like
one.
how trauma like
Is
just
in the
stays in
body.
your body. And
Yeah.
so that's the reason why mindfulness and meditating is so important. And you just really have to, you have to step back and sit with your feelings and know where it's coming from, and also like learning about like how like stress and things and like mental health issues can really affect your body physically, where you can be creating like extra types of hormones and things
Mm,
like that, like that really some people would say like they could potentially cause things like cancer and things like that,
yeah.
if it's really severe. So for me, um my therapy journey was a lot of like just talking, but I also did like EMDR, which is where like they do like the rapid eye
Yeah.
movement and thing, where and mine was
How
like,
was that for you?
it was interesting because I did it virtually. So it
Interesting.
was on a screen. So on the screen I would see the little like this little ball just like moving back and forth across the screen, and at the same time, you're kind of like looking at it and trying to focus, and then the therapist is asking you questions or asking you to visualize things, and that was really hard for me. I think like I had the same experience that you had, where I would start like crying like
Mm,
out of nowhere, and just she was just asking me to like clear my mind, and it was in those moments of like really clearing my mind that were so difficult. And that's why I'm saying like it's hard to sit with your feelings, it's
yeah.
hard to sit with your thoughts a lot of times. And but I think like at the end of it, I think it really helped me to feel I think it was just learning to be more self-aware about what I needed to do, or the things that I needed to change to
Mm,
just, for like my self-healing, and for my and a lot of it was like, boundary setting with people like my family, like how to do that in a way. And so we talked about that was a lot of my a lot of my therapy was like I was talking the my difficulties were like, how do I do this, and it had to do with my relationships with people and my family, like how to navigate those, because I feel
yeah.
like those are the ones like in many ways, like I'm in therapy because of them.
It is.
Yeah. So it's like, and I was like, I don't want
Thanks,
to blame it
family.
on them, but
Yeah.
but it is because like, this is how I grew up, and I'm such a mess, but I'm trying to make amends with that, and still like, have a healthy relationship with them. And how do
Yeah.
I do that? Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the biggest thing that or the most important thing that you've learned in that so far? I mean, it sounds like you're still learning, and as we all are. uh, but what's been the biggest thing that's been helpful for you in that?
I think one of the things that my therapist would say is like, well, what would it look like? She would ask me like, what would it look like if you didn't go on that family vacation? If you told them I can't go.
Mm,
It's like, are they not gonna be your family anymore? Are they not gonna talk to you?
yeah,
And it's like, no, but like I'm gonna feel like, they're gonna
yeah,
so it's a
yeah,
lot of it is
yeah.
on us. We just have like, it's like, well, you don't know that. So,
Yeah,
and so we just have these expectations, or we feel that we're gonna get this response from people, and it's like you can't control the way they feel.
yeah,
Um, but you can control what you do with them, and communication is, so such an important part of that. Um, that, because they're not and that's what makes it hard, right? Because other people around your circle that are not in your healing journey like you, that are not going to therapy, that are not doing, whatever it is for their mental health, they're not going to understand a lot of times where you're coming from. And sometimes
yeah.
when you tell them, like, they don't even ask you about it. They're like, okay, oh, you're going to therapy, okay.
Ah, qué bueno.
Yeah, okay, okay, so so what are you going to have for lunch tomorrow? Like, they change the topic, they don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
like, that's
it's
just you
it's kind of
just
like how
learn.
you said, if we ourselves, and we who are educated and have already certain knowledge, and we ourselves find it hard to confront these things, I can only imagine. And if I'm being honest, con mi mamá, my grandma, she's the one who took us in and raised us, so le digo mi mamá. But it's funny because I in my family, in my siblings, I feel like I'm the person who's breaking generational cycles. Just because of my parents. To give you a little context, I was taken away when I was 10, and both of my parents were users for methamphetamine. And it's been almost 3 years now that my mom passed away from overdose. Um, so for me, I'm a very curious person. I have so many questions, and I'm just always like,
Mhm,
why? And I do that to my mama, and she hates it, Rosemary. She hates it because I'll be like, oh, ma, like, cuando estabas embarazada con mi tía, ¿cómo sentías? ¿Sentiste que tenías apoyo? I'll be asking her these questions, and she'll be like, ay, mijo, ya me vas a hacer pensar. No quiero hacer eso. And I'm like, I'm just trying to have a conversation with you and understand, like,
mhm,
understand you, and just be more in tune. Um, and she'll sometimes she'll follow along, and she'll answer my questions, but when she's fed up and she's like, "Ay, mijo, like, ya andas haciendo tus preguntas, like, ahorita
mhm,
no." Um, so I totally understandable, and I feel like that's why everybody has every como decía mi papá, like, todo a su divino tiempo. Like,
mhm,
everybody's gonna come around, hopefully someday or another. But within all of this, I feel like actions speak louder than words. And
mhm,
so it's not until you actually start doing these things where it's like, oh, Rosemary didn't come to the family trip, it's because she was doing this. Oh, wow. And because of your action doing that,
mhm,
you didn't, I don't know if for you, but for a while, it was hard for me to say no.
mhm,
And I could not say no for the life of me. And I was always like, yeah, I'll fit it in, I'll do this. And that was one of the biggest boundaries that I had to set for myself, because it was like, I'm drained, and I can't pour into somebody else's cup if
mhm,
my cup isn't even full. Um, so yeah, I feel like within all of that, we're still learning. But it's always interesting to kind of just see other people in their journeys and their process as well, like my grandparents and all of that. But um yeah, yeah. And I feel like within all of that, do you feel like, um within your professional career now, that same thing that you struggle with, like, with your family and setting boundaries, do you struggle like that with, like, the work that you do as an attorney with uh people, with community members, because there's a lot of work to be done, especially in law. And it's kind of like you're the go-to person, like you're the person tú eres la que sabes, like people give you that. And um do you find it hard to say no to people who you come across as an attorney as well? And um what do you
Yeah.
what do you tell yourself for that? Because I know, like, as a community health worker, there's only so much that we can do, and you have to remind yourself that, but it's so hard, you
Mhm.
know
Yeah, it's really hard because a lot of times, you get folks that come in with something, with an issue, and you're like, well, we don't, our funding doesn't really cover that. I can't, but I know how to do it. But, so let's see what we can do for you.
Mhm.
Or even like, even just when when I was on maternity leave, we were working on this really big litigation case, and we were still like in the process of filing it, and the other attorney that I have here, she's fairly young. She's 2 years in. And so I no one told me that I should come back earlier from leave, but I just felt like I felt an
Mm.
obligation for her because I care so much for her. She's
Yeah.
she's great, and I wanted to be there for her, and for her to feel supported. So I ended up, cutting my maternity leave a little short so I could come back part-time and help her out with the rest of the
Mm.
case. So that was like, you know,
Dang.
so yeah, so and
That's
I think
very-
how it kind of affects, because it means, I am gonna take some time away from my daughter. But I try to make it work where I was like, you know, um, I was still with my baby for most of the
Yeah.
day, or I would bring her to the office, or like,
Mm.
or I would just do the work really late at night when she was sleeping, which is
Yeah.
something that sometimes I still have to do, just to be able to find that quality time for her. But yeah, like it is like, because you, again, it's because you just care so much and you want to help, and sometimes you feel like, if and this is something that my therapist also said, because I always thought, like, if I don't do it, then who's gonna do it?
Mm.
And my therapist would say, they'll figure out a way. They
Mm.
will.
Mm.
And so it's hard to
Yeah.
remind myself that, I'm not the only one that can help out there, but I just, I feel like, okay, it's gonna be harder for them
Yeah.
unless I can connect with someone that can help. Like, but I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure somebody would have helped out my
Yeah.
colleague, to
Yeah.
to file the case if I wasn't here. There's people that are, have been attorneys here, the organization, way longer than me, but I just felt like I had to be there for her.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're passionate about law?
I am. I think, like, it's just, passionate about helping people, and then
Mm.
law is one of the ways that you can do it.
Mm.
There's so many other ways that you can help people, but I think that that is one of the ways where you can help folks, especially because the work that I do is specifically for farm workers.
Yeah.
So we don't represent anyone else. Like, you have to be like some kind, either work at a nursery or be a farm worker, and they don't always have access to a lot of services, or they don't feel as comfortable going to places, especially if someone doesn't speak their language. And then we
Yeah.
all know we have clients sometimes that are, they're Spanish speakers, or they speak an indigenous language, so they're
Mm.
even less likely to have, seek out legal support,
Yeah.
um or have transportation access to somewhere. So I think,
Mm.
like, I feel like, yeah, like, that's something that we can do to make a difference and to help people in their lives. And yeah.
What's the biggest barrier that you see within the work that you do within the community?
I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, I know
There's
there's a
so
lot. Yeah.
many. I think, like, one of the biggest ones is, just access to resources. And that applies to, like, legal aids like myself, like the one
Yeah.
I work with, where we need more money to help people. And so do
Mm.
all the legal aids across the state of California. And yeah, I would say that that's probably like one of the biggest problems that we really, it always seems like there's way too many people going to medical school or to law school, but
Yeah.
really there aren't enough attorneys to
Mm.
help people in our societies that need access to, like, help, especially low income individuals. So I feel like that the resources, financial resources, is a big
Yeah.
problem.
I think that's one of the big ones for a lot of organizations and entities. Um I guess I wanted to ask because I'm curious, as a Latina within being an attorney, as a male working as a community health worker, um, you know, I'm in a more predominantly female industry, and so because of that, it's because of who I am that fits well with the work and what I want to do. And essentially, it's basically what you said, is helping people, right? But the way that I'm able to do it through this is by being able to connect folks within certain resources in the community or departments internally within IHP. But to do this kind of work, it requires me to have empathy. It requires me to have a sense of understanding, to be compassionate, to be patient. So and I feel like as a man, it's not very often where you're able to find men with those kind of qualities, and it's just because of the notion of what a man is, right?
Mhm.
And so with that, like, I'm curious if what that has looked like for you as a Latina, as a female within law, because you know if somebody who's very driven, somebody who's very ambitious would say, well, that's a very masculine, or that's a very like you know like go-getter attitude, versus the I'm more patient, I'm going to hear you out. So I'm curious, like, what qualities or what characteristics, like self-awareness, like being compassionate, like being assertive, to be heard, right? what has what has felt more natural for you in the job that you're doing right now, and which ones do you feel like you need to work on a little bit more, for yourself? And it could tie into professional, personal, um but I'm curious because for myself, I feel like my thing is I'm very patient and understanding and also driven, but I'm also pretty disorganized. So, I'm constantly cleaning my room. I'm constant because my tia always told me your room is a representation of your mind. And so I'm in this phase of like being more organized and being more kind of just uh oriented with my time and my energy. Um and I feel like it's taken me a while, but I've had to kind of reclaim my own voice and be okay with being assertive, being determined. Because a part of me was always like, no, like you don't want to come off too aggressive or too, but it's like it's this relationship of I told Tristan on the last podcast, but I told him like it's this mentality of, and it sounds very harsh, but I don't give a fuck what people think, right? Because I know what I'm doing and I know where I come from, and I have to have that kind of mentality because I don't have something to fall back on. But I also really care about what people think, because that's my heart trying to, help the world. So uh I'm curious, like, just what that looks like for you.
Yeah. And just to add to that, I would say, some people say that like a cluttered desk is a sign of a genius, like Albert Einstein too, which is me. I
You
try.
don't
I
want to see both of my
try.
desks then.
Yeah, no, my room is a mess. My desk is it's organized disaster because I know where
You
I
know where
left.
everything's at.
I know
Yep.
where everything. If somebody
Yep.
moves something, I'm like, I know where exactly where I left that file with a single page in there.
I just
Don't touch my desk
I'm the
stuff.
same way.
I think for me, because I am very assertive and I've always been hyper driven and independent, that for me, the part, even though I care about helping people, that I need to work. I do need to work on my like listening skills and being
Mm,
patient, because when somebody comes into with me to my office with a issue, they start telling me a story, and in my mind I'm already, okay, I see the facts, I see
creating
where
the
this is going, okay, I'm issue spotting, I'm seeing,
mm,
okay, what, this could be a potential legal issue, okay, this could be the solution.
yeah.
And I want to ask certain questions because I'm like, I think I already know what the issue here is. And
Mm,
so and that's hard because sometimes our clients, like, they want to tell us a story because for them, like, all of those, they think all of those things are important, and legally I know that they're not. And sometimes you're super busy, right? So you're like, Just tell me the facts, tell me what I need to know."
yeah.
And so it's kind of like taking a step back and being like, okay, like, I need to make time for this. Like,
Mm,
they for them it's really important. They came all the way on the bus from like North Shore or Mecca
yeah.
to tell me about this problem that they're having with the unemployment department, and why this happened, and explain the note, or what explain to me what they think these notices are. And they're probably wrong. I was like,
Yeah.
eventually I find out like that's not what happened.
Yeah.
But for them it's important, and I think like I need to work on being more patient and doing that, because like for me, I'm like, I just want to solve your problem, right? Because
Yeah.
we need to solve your problem. They wronged you. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's take care of it. But I think that's a piece, right? That you just to make them feel more comfortable, and knowing that you're on their side, which I think they know. A lot of them, they're like, oh, yo sé que me va a regañar la abogada, because like I didn't come to bring the paperwork. I went to a notario instead because I thought it was easier. They
Yeah.
already know. I'm like, why did you do that? I told you not to go to a notario anymore. But I think like yeah, just finding that balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Well, I also feel like it's kind of hard because, like you said, if you're one of the few folks in the area that does the work that you're doing, and you're getting an influx of folks requiring these services, and you're the first person that they come across who is actually, one, speaks the language, and two, is open to hearing them out, they're gonna tell you everything, and like I just feel like, one, you have to be more compassionate towards yourself, because it's also the work that you're involved in, and it's kind of like, well, how do you, you know, uh, how do you practice more patience and listening skills when you have two other people possibly in the waiting room who are also waiting, to get services, and it's hard. Like, when you say that, it's super hard. So I think one of the biggest things I've learned how to do over the years for myself is just practice more compassion, because even though we're our biggest we are our biggest fans, our support, our number one fans, we can also be our number one harshest critic. Then like you said, when once the day ends and it's coming to an end and we're sitting with those thoughts, that's when kind of like it's like, all right, things start coming up. And so with that, I want to touch on the idea of mental health and kind of how that has resonated, within your own, what you've learned within your own like upbringing. Because, I know we share parallel stories, and I'm just curious, like, what you've learned about your mental health within your journey of, um, you know, growing up within a family of seven and going into law, and just being a chingona, like being a mom and still doing the work that needs to be done in the community, and still trying to stretch yourself for your extended family, um and what you've learned or what you've seen, and what's worked for you.
Yeah, let's see what I've learned again through, I think, like the journey of going through to therapy, and talking about my childhood and how that has affected me. I think like one of the biggest takeaway for me was, and I think you kind of touched upon it a little bit, because you were asking your grandma all these questions, and it's like a lot of times you want to understand why something happened to you. I think more than anything you're like it. But I think when my therapist, kind of explained, it's like this, that has nothing to do with you, because the choices that other people make
Mm,
have nothing to do with you.
yeah.
So, and you can feel two things. You can feel at the same time, you can feel a lot of love for your parents, and you can also hold them accountable. And
Mm,
it's a difficult thing to sit with, especially in my case. My mother passed away from cancer about, it's going to be 10 years now this year.
sorry.
Um, and so I think that that was like a hard part, because I think when she passed away, we weren't completely okay.
Mm,
Even though she asked me like right before she passed, she was like, do you forgive me, for not being like a great mom and stuff? And I was like, yeah, because she was dying, and I felt
yeah.
like that was the thing, but I didn't really feel it in my heart. And I think like it took some time for me to be like, yeah, you know what? I do forgive her, but I also I hold her accountable in the ways where she may have not been the best parent, or where my father maybe wasn't the best parent either, or was not, present as much. But I think for me, like being able to do that has been healing.
Yeah.
And then, and I can think of her like, with a lot of love, and really miss her, and at
Mm,
the same time still feel like I don't need to understand, why others made choices that they made. because it could have been they, they had traumas in their lives as well. They had
Yeah.
difficult childhood, and
100%.
that's usually where it stems from. But
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with me, and so I just need to heal, and continue my life, and know that it had nothing to do with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like the mind, it's really easy to get into this place of me, right? And so I completely understand that. And what was that moment for you that clicked where it was like, oh, like I can forgive my mom, but I also can feel the way that I feel towards her in this sense. What do you remember, or does that?
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. I think it was just we were discussing, like having a discussion specifically about my mom. Um and and just me telling them, like, this is how I feel about her, like, these are all the things that I feel so upset about, and things, and it makes it hard because I'm also, like, really sad about the fact that she's not here. Like,
Yeah.
I felt like, do I think I question, like, did I really love my mother if I'm, like, trying to hold her accountable when she's
Mm,
passed away for such a long time and she's no longer here? And so I think that that was the moment where, she said, like, it's okay to feel these things. Like, you're
mm,
not, it's okay to feel that way about anyone. Like, no one can tell you, like, how to feel about a specific person or a specific situation. That's very much
yeah.
about you. Just know that the actions that you take them because of you. Like, you can't blame other people. And
Yeah.
in the same way that, you're not responsible for your parents' actions or your grandparents' actions or your siblings'
Yeah.
actions or anyone else. Like, they're responsible for their own things. You can only feel like what about what you're doing.
Yeah. No, sí es cierto. And I asked that because for myself, I asked that because my last year of college was when I took the initiative upon myself, and at that time my parents were already separated doing their own thing. um and I told myself, like, if I really want to heal from this trauma, I have to forgive my parents, and I have to talk to them individually, and I have to let them know how I feel, because I felt like if I didn't do that, that in the future was going to affect me negatively, and if anything were to happen to my parents, I would regret it. And I feel like because I know history repeats itself, and because I know my genetics and where I come from, and knowing addiction runs in my family, and knowing all these different things, I didn't want to get to a point where I was like so regretful, and because something happened and I wasn't able to express myself, and now I have to use something to cope with that, right?
Mhm.
So I appreciate that you were able to talk. Did you able to have that conversation the last moments with your mom? Because I feel like when I talked to my mom and my dad, and that last year of college, and I told them, like, I forgive you, I know everything that happened, but I'm here now. You need to create your life for yourself, just as I am, and know that I love you. That's it.
Mhm.
But I can't see you as my parents. Like, that was the biggest thing for me, was that I can't see you as my parents, because if I were to love you like my parents, I'm hurting myself, because I create this expectation through love, and I know that you're gonna fail me, because that's just what's happened. So for my own mental health and emotional health and my own sanity and my own healing, I had to, talk to them and forgive them, and tell them, remind them that I love them. And I'm so thankful that I did that, because my mom passed away almost 3 years ago. She had an overdose with methamphetamine. And, you know, it was de repente. And I hadn't talked to her in a couple months. And then it was the next day, they were like, hey, like, your mom's in the hospital and she might not make it. So I feel like I'm very open and in talking about this kind of stuff, because I feel like I've healed from it. But it's because I was able to, one, have these conversations with them before, and two, come to a place within myself to be like, you have to forgive, because if you don't, you're just holding it onto your heart, and you don't know what that's gonna come up, how that's gonna come up, when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. And like you said, like, all these kind of things end up turning into something, disease, like,
Mhm.
I like, yeah, I don't want to be getting cancer by 40, because I'm holding on to all of my negative past. And so, you know, I think about these things. So I'm glad that you were able to do that for yourself. And I appreciate what you're talking about. And I'm curious, like, when you think about mental health now, because I feel like now mental health is at a point where people are openly able to talk about it, and you know, we're still understanding how that looks like within ourselves. And I'm curious, like, what you've seen within the community or the people that you've helped through the work that you do, and how does mental health, you know, come into play, or how do you see, you know, connecting folks with services, and like, what would you like to address, uh given that we're spreading, you know, we're sharing light on different themes. People at 40 now, I was talking to Melina Duarte, and she was like, you know, I just recently got diagnosed, or I think I have ADHD. And I was like, yeah, I mean, you know, like,
I'm
I'm
sure she does.
I think she
I
said she
think
did.
we all do.
I think she said she did, and I was like, "That's crazy," because I feel like, you know, at times you know, I resonate, and that's
Mhm.
how my mind is. But you know, even at the age that we're at right now, like, we're still learning about ourselves, and sometimes we become so egocentric, where it's like, I know everything because
Mhm.
I have this, and it's like, well, no, like, we're not perfect, you know, and we're
Yeah.
still learning a lot of ourselves. So I know there was a lot there, but
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, I feel like, yeah, continuing to do therapy and actually working on stuff, and being very intentional more than anything, because that's something that I think that I still need to work on. And I told my husband this. I was like, I know I'm acting crazy right now. It's just, it's hard, being a mom postpartum. Like, I'm only, she's only 8 months old right now, and there's a
oh
lot going
wow,
on, and
yeah,
it can be really hard. And so, like, I think about it a lot, because, like, for him, I think he does more of like the um just being, he's very patient. He's like the complete
mm.
opposite of me, and so it's just
That's a good
crazy.
balance.
Yeah, so it is. So he keeps me on that balance, and I think that if he wasn't as patient as he is, he probably wouldn't be with me anymore, because I'm just too all over the place. And he's very yeah, he's very supportive, and he was the one that, really, I think, like, he really pushed me to, like, I want you to go to therapy, like, if we're
Mm.
going to, even before we started talking about having children potentially, he's like, I want you to do that. And so I'm so grateful that he pushed me to do that, because, like, I think I wouldn't have done it, or even though I had thought about, like, oh, I think I have to go and do it, but then, like, I'm gonna leave it. But the hard part in doing the whole, like, even finding the therapist that was appropriate for me and
Mm.
everything, that was difficult. Like, I had to ask other friends, so I did look out to, like, okay, other friends that I know have gone to therapy. And then I ended up finding a great therapist on the Latinx therapy.
Oh, great
Yeah,
resource.
yeah, they
Yeah.
are so amazing. Like, I love my therapist. And then just for me, it was difficult because, like, they didn't take my insurance.
Mm.
So I had to, they could give you like a super bill or whatever it's called. I
Yeah.
think that's what it's called, where they can, they can charge it. You can pay a friend, and then they'll charge like a percentage of it to
Yeah.
pay, have your insurance pay off of it. I thought that was too problematic, so I just ended up using my health reimbursement account. So I think, like,
Mm.
that is a problem. A lot of, like, the really amazing therapists. I'm not saying the other therapists that only take certain insurance are not good. It's just that I feel like a lot of what my therapist told me was, like, it's really, it's very tedious for
Yeah.
them to do the whole getting approved by an insurance, that they don't
Yeah.
go through the process. So
Yeah, it's
so
complicated.
that means that a lot of people out there that really need help and really want to go see a therapist that could really help them, they might end up going to someone and say, like, therapy's not for me. And it's only because of that. You have to really build a good connection with the therapist, I think.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's kind of like my friend said, it's kind of like dating, like, you kind
Mm.
of go there, and if you just don't feel the connection, it's okay to say, like, hi, you know what, this is it, where I'm not coming for a second date because I just didn't
Yeah.
feel the connection, and they understand.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a big piece, like, where access to mental health resources, even though, like, we talk about, like, oh, referrals to, like the Latino Commission for
Yeah.
students and their families. It's like, but there might be a better resource out there that can be a better fit for the person, because it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
And if people don't have the insurance or can't afford to pay for therapy, then how do we expect them to be able to access that resource. So I think that that's the biggest barrier that I see
Yeah.
for the community. And and there's still some, some people that feel like, oh, therapists, eso es para locos, yo no
Yeah.
necesito eso, or,
Yeah.
there's still a little bit of that, but I think in general, I think I do see that there is some progress in there, and it's providing for better access, I think would be better to
Yeah.
help our community.
Yeah, I agree. And shout out Adriana and Latinx Therapy because
Mhm.
I was interning with them for a while when I was living in LA. So
Nice.
I love that you were able to connect with that resource. And I agree. Like, and I feel like that's where a lot of the system isn't set up to support us in the ways that we need because like even though like you said you're saying we're making these referrals to Latino Commission and shout out Latino Commission all the amazing work that they do, but being the only one of the Spanish providers in the county and being overwhelmed by all the need, like there's more demand than supply.
Mhm.
And so kind of like how you're saying we need more folks to go into medical school and to go into law school and to create these narratives and these representations that we can see ourselves in those folks is the same thing as well for therapists and mental health and counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists because I really do feel like if you don't if it, and it is true, it is like dating, to see it to find a therapist. And I always tell folks like it's not going to be on the first try, and don't be so upset at yourself and be patient with the process
Mhm.
because sometimes somebody just wants to like get resources and get services and access to it. And it's like it's a process, and if you don't like the first person, you're trying to find the second person. You really have to find a match and be comfortable enough to open yourself up to these people because essentially they're gonna hear everything about you, and so
Everything.
everything and when I first did that, and when I first got therapy sessions, I'm not gonna lie, when I was living in LA, I had Kaiser, and I was in the process of trying to get therapy, and they just made the process so complicated. And I was one of those people. I was like, you know what? It's not for me. Like,
Mhm.
I'm fine right now. I'm fine.
Mhm.
And that's when COVID happened. I moved back home, and I was like, all right, I'm not fine anymore. Um, and it was because of the fact that my siblings were in the CVUSD district that they got free services for mental health, and they were like, it applies to all family members. So that's when I was able to get services, and I was able to connect with Latino Commission and find a therapist. And I feel like for me, one of the biggest things I share with folks that I learned from therapy was my therapist taught me this phrase called catch it, check it, change it. So catch your thought, check it, ask your questions, why am I having this thought, and then change it. And I feel like for me that was so eye-opening because I was like, wow, I can check my thoughts like that and they don't just have to be so like persistent. And that was eye-opening. So uh yeah, I feel like and that's why we're doing this podcast and just trying to like showcase folks doing the work in the community because you've been at CRLA for a while. How long now?
Over 4 years now.
Over 4 years.
Mhm.
And my biggest thing is working within the community. It's like, and I see this within the whole Coachella Valley, but I just feel like there's a lack of collaboration. And everybody's doing similar work, but everybody's on different pages. And so it's like the valley can be small, but it also can be equally as big. um and so I feel like what we're trying to do with this podcast is just one, have somebody else, whoever's listening to this, see themselves in Rosemary and be like, I'm also equally as driven. I also am creative and do these other things. And maybe now, listening to this, I can see myself as being an attorney or going into law. And equally, just trying to bring light onto the topic of mental health and just destigmatize these conversations and this notion of, what it means to navigate mental health, both as a male and female and as a human being. And it's important work, but a la misma vez, it's just it's a very patient journey to be on. um so I mean, with that, I'm not sure if you want to share anything else, some like final thoughts that you have that you'd like to share with anybody listening, that kind of stuck with you throughout the conversation. Um, yeah,
Yeah, well, I want to thank you for inviting me, Fausto. I think this is such a great topic to have as a conversation, and yeah, I one thing that I would tell folks is just, just to be kind to yourself, like be very compassionate with yourself. And the work is ongoing. You don't go to therapy and you're going to be cured of all your traumas and issues. That's not the way it works.
yeah,
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to continue doing that. It's really is about like improving that relationship to yourself. Really, that's how I see it. Like, just like you want to have, if you're married, you want to maintain a good relationship with your spouse, partner. It's the same thing with therapy, like in mental health. Like, you have to keep working on it, because if not, like, there are moments where you do have like these breakdowns. You're like, I don't understand what's happening, and you
yeah,
have to use those skills that you learn in therapy or otherwise. If you're a religious person and that's something that you like to do because you want to talk to that person, at your religious facility about your issues, and that helps you. If prayer helps you, whatever it is that helps you, you have to be consistent, because this is really is something that it's a long-term thing, and it's never ending. But yeah, there are people out there. I do want people to know there are a lot of us out there. Like, I think it's like todos estamos locos, decía mi abuelo, like todos estamos locos allá afuera. And it's true, everybody,
yeah,
we're our own little bubble. Like, you don't know the person in the bus next to you. They may be reading a book and they seem super calm, but there's like so many things going on in their minds and their lives too.
yeah,
So just keep that in mind, that that you're not alone on this journey. That, we all need like a tune up once in a while, and
yeah,
it's okay to talk to folks. I think like most people that I've talked to, they're like, oh yeah, I've gone to therapy, or like my spouse did, or my parents did, or someone did. Someone knows someone that did, and we're all in this journey together.
yeah. I love that, and I wanna just remind folks, like, to your point, therapists also need therapists, right? Like, we all, it's not like therapists or psychologists are on this pedestal, just like any other professional. Doctors, like, a doctor needs a doctor too,
Yeah.
right? And so this concept of everyone kind of needs that from time to time, whatever it may be, the physical tune up, the mental tune up, the emotional tune up, the spiritual tune up. And I think, like, kind of like how you're saying, just being mindful of those different areas within our lives, so that way, we can address them and give them the space that they deserve. So I appreciate that. With that, I have two follow-up questions real quick, and then we'll go ahead and call it an episode. But my first question is, uh what word would you give to yourself, given that we're going into this second half of the year? My mind is very, like, how would I call it? It's just it likes to structure things. So for me, doing what I do, I like to break down the year into quarters. And so 3, 6, 9, 12. And now we're going into the second half of the year. So the next 6 months. What word would you give yourself that you'd like to work on for the second half of the year? Uh, Last year for me, it was focused. So that was my year. That was my word for the year. This year it's organized. So I went from focus to super tunnel vision to organize, trying to bring everything together. And I'm curious, what word comes to mind for yourself moving forward into the second half of the year?
That was gonna be my word, Fausto.
Oh
Organize.
gosh.
I need to organize.
Accountability partners.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, yeah, we can be accountability buddies. I think that we do need one. I'm supposed to have one. I actually have one at Sierra Lay, and I haven't reached out to them. And they were assigned to me in December, and they haven't reached
Oh
out to me either. So,
gosh.
yeah, I think like um, I'm gonna do patience.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
patience. I'm gonna work on that the rest of the year as well. Being patient with myself too, I think,
Mm.
and others.
Yeah. There's this patient panda. That's what I like to tell myself. Patient panda. Um, and what's Rosemary's go-to coffee drink or tea drink? Coffee, when you go to a coffee shop, what's your go-to drink that you get, or item?
I really like this dulce de leche cold brew.
Ooh, that sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's really sweet. It's not for real coffee drinkers, I think,
Uh,
but that's what I
it
like.
has coffee in it. That's all
Yeah.
that matters. Yeah. Well, Rosemary, I want to be mindful of time, and I just want to appreciate you being a part of this, being a part of the conversation. I've been telling folks, I'd love to do a follow-up interview. Once we get to a point, I envision doing 100 episodes, and so, I want to come back to our conversation eventually, and you know, talk more about law and see kind of your thoughts on where law is, what can be improved within law, and just kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the day-to-day grind that we do. But I'm just thankful that you were able to take some time out of your busy day and to share space with us, share your thoughts. And I hope that with this, somebody, the whole point of this is to, like I said, inspire and to motivate somebody to just seguirle echándole ganas. Um, so I want to thank you, and hopefully in the future, we can have a future episode. But thank you, Rosemary. I really appreciate everything and everything you had to say from the bottom of my heart.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you, Fausto.
yeah, claro que sí. And with that, I'll cut the video right here.